Hey guys, my name is RyanCentral and welcome to HitScan. Neon is an agent that people are going to have a lot of questions about. In this video, I answer 132 of those questions on the myth busting of her abilities, the stats, and everything that you'll need to know when it comes to the nitty gritty on what this agent can do. So question 1, we'll start with the fast lane. How much does it cost? Well, it's 300 credits, you get 1 charge. It's the wall ability, and the second question being, what is the duration of the wall? In total, it lasts 7 seconds from the ability being used. The ability animation of you actually pulling up your hands and pulling up the wall takes about half a second as a wind up, and then the wall stays up for about 6 seconds. As you see with the wall going up, it does start from you and then waves itself forward to the end. So from you throwing your hands up and then the back of the wall furthest to you going down, it's 7 seconds total. What is the maximum range of the wall? As far as I can tell, it's about 50 meters, but I could be wrong. I suck at testing the general ranges of stuff, but it is pretty long. About 50 meters sounds about right. What is the yellow thing on screen? Well, the devs refer to it as the missile, and it dictates how far the wall goes and also what it goes over. The missile travels forward until it hits something, basically, and then the wall, when it's placed, will travel up to that point as well. You've seen a couple of examples on screen, so it does allow you to throw the fast lane wall over objects similar to a Phoenix Blaze, and also more likely a Viper wall too. If there's terrain in the way, you can use this missile to get the wall over it. So some really cool lineups that you can do. The follow-up question now is, does it interact completely like a Viper wall then? The answer is mostly no, but if anybody remembers how old Viper used to work from the closed beta in early 2020, it's effectively like that, and it's also just as buggy and inconsistent as the old wall too. The missile has to travel further. If you're in a building, for example, with no ceiling gaps, then you won't be able to get that fast lane through that wall. But also there are some gaps in between terrain that the fast lane cannot go through. For example, if you're trying to get through onto B lobby on bind, you won't be able to because the gap in between fountain and B lobby is too large for the fast lane to be used in. It is hard to gauge number-wise where that cutoff point is. What is the weapon equip time after using fast lane? Your hands are stuck in animation for 1 full second whilst using the ability, and then between the animation ending and the first bullet fired was about 2/3 of a second, so in total 1.66 seconds from using the ability to firing a gun. Does the fast lane wall damage the enemy? Yes, and it does about 30 damage per second to an enemy. The tick rate of the damage is 30 times in a second, each of which doing 1 little bit of damage. Does the wall damage teammates? Yes, it does, but much like other abilities in the game, it does 1/3 of the total damage, so this wall does 10 damage per second to your teammates. Does it damage you? It doesn't do anything to you, including healing like a Phoenix wall. You don't get any preferential treatment like that. Does the wall stop any damage? No bullets pass through for you, your teammates, and all the utility can go through it as well. It's just effectively a smoke in that regard. Does it stop flashes? Yes, it denies vision, and it also stops recon abilities for the same reason. Does it damage objects? This is a bit of a weird one. It depends on the ability, and it's something that's really odd and inconsistent. For example, Silver Dart, when it's on the wall or when it's on the ground, the wall will not break it. The Silver Drone, however, will take damage from the wall. However, because the drone has 120 HP, it takes 4 seconds fully for the blaze to kill it, which isn't really that likely. Does the wall damage the Sage wall? No, it doesn't do any damage to it at all, and that's the same as a Phoenix Blaze too. What about the Killjoy turret? This is where it gets really odd, because you can break the Killjoy turret with the wall, and of course you can block the vision from the turret to shoot you with the wall at the same time. When you get to the Killjoy alarm bot, your fast lane doesn't do any damage or break the alarm bot, which is the same as Phoenix's Blaze. Also the same as Phoenix's Molly. So again, devs, maybe buff that aspect to Phoenix, make him able to destroy some of these deployables. They might be a little bit better. I'm quite surprised at this one. And unfortunately, that does mean that the fast lane doesn't actually damage nor destroy a Killjoy lockdown, which is a shame because what I'm showing on screen was the first interaction that came into my head that I thought would be a really good real life example, seeing if you could actually use the fast lane to go through B main to catch the spot where the lockdown's placed. You can do that with the wall technically, but as you're seeing, it doesn't actually do any damage. Does the fast lane break the tripwire? No. Does it break the cipher camera? It does actually, which is kind of cool. Does it break the chamber trademark? No, it doesn't, and it also doesn't break chamber's rendezvous. Does it break Raze's boombot? Yes, again, but it's very unlikely due to you having to line up the wall with the trajectory of where the boombot's going, and also the boombot has a good amount of health. Does the fast lane damage flashes for Sky? No, it doesn't break them. It does do damage to the Trailblazer, but the Tiger having 100 HP does take a little bit of while as well. Does the fast lane damage the sky ult? No, it doesn't, and that's everything to go over the fast lane ability. Let's go on to the relay bolt, starting with how much does it cost. It costs 200 credits and you get 2 charges of it per round. What is the range of the stun? The radius is 5 meters, similar to a Phoenix Molly and a lot of abilities in the game. What's the wind up time of the stun? It takes about 1 second from it hitting the ground to the stun actually being activated, so the enemy does have 1 second to get out of that dangerous space. Is the stun windup different between the 2 orbs that you can fire? No, they're exactly the same, regardless of whether it's the first bounce or second, the windup time is exactly the same. How long does the stun last for when you're hit by relay bolt? About 3 seconds, so it's a little bit less than Breach's stun, which I think is 3.5 seconds off the top of my head. Is the stun duration different between the 2 orbs bouncing? No, they're exactly the same. Does the relay bolt stun teammates? It does, and it also stuns you. Is the duration of the stun different on you, your teammates, or enemies? Nope, they're all exactly the same. Everybody gets stunned for the same amount of time. Does being double stunned by both the bounces affect the duration at all? And the answer is no. Much like other stuns in the game, if you're hit by them at the exact same time, you don't get double stunned, if that makes sense. What if they're delayed a little bit? Well, much like other stuns, again, it resets the duration. For example, with what you're seeing on screen, if I get stunned by a breach and then stunned by a neon shortly afterwards, it resets the stun duration for however long that ability would be. Can the bolt stun people through walls? It can, which makes for some really cool and interesting plays. What is the vertical range of the stun? You can kind of see it with what we're showing with Jet here. It's roughly just over head height that you're able to get away from being stunned, which also answers the question, can a Jet updraft over the stun? She can do. What about when it comes to stacked boxes and places like that? On a double stack box like this, if you're stood on it normally or even crouching, you won't be stunned if the relay bolt hits the ground. But if you're like stood on that side and the side of the box, just like you're seeing on screen where you're kind of a bit more over to the side, it can connect onto you. You can of course just fire the stun to hit the top of the box, which will definitely catch them. Can you hit 2 different players at different elevations with the stun? Yes, but it depends on where you're throwing it. If you're throwing it at the ground and there's a player on a stacked box like so, it obviously won't catch them like we just went over. But there is another thing to highlight from another question. Does the stun targets below where you're hitting it? And the answer is yes. The stun range also goes beneath an object, like you're seeing with the Heaven and Hell example from Ascent. It also means that if you hit this space on a box with these 2 targets, you can hit both of them on a lot more consistent way than you usually would. What is the equip time for your gun after using the ability? It's 1.3 seconds total. The hand animation is about 3/4 of a second, and so the gun has a faster equip time after using these abilities specifically. Does the bolt bounce off teammates or enemies? The bolt doesn't bounce off teammates, but it does bounce off enemies. So be a bit careful. The bounce could be really odd and actually screw you over in a couple of cases. How fast does the relay bolt travel? From testing vaguely, it looks like the relay bolt travels at the same speed as a fully charged silver dart. However, the physics are a little bit different when it comes to trajectory. So what trajectory does the stun travel at? As you see in the relay bolt dips off a little bit faster than a silver fully charged dart. It seems to be more in line trajectory-wise to be a recon dart with a charge of 2. That's kind of what it's in line with, so I think lineups are more likely to work with that than others. Obviously, it travels a lot faster than a recon dart with a charge of 2, but it seems to follow the same movement patterns. I could be wrong. A couple of people have said different things about this, but those that are saying that it travels the exact same way as a fully charged silver dart are kind of half right and half wrong. Does the bolt dissipate and run out mid-air? Yes, if it doesn't hit an object in the air, it dissipates completely after about 5 seconds. Are the times different between the bounces? Yes, technically kind of. The 5-second duration of being in the air isn't just between bounces, it's total. It's hard to really show, but say for example, I throw an orb and it hits the ground after 3 seconds, the second bounce needs to come in after 2 seconds, otherwise it'll disappear. That's a bit of a confusing one, but I hope you get it. Effectively, you can only have these orbs hitting the ground within 5 seconds before they will disappear completely. But I don't think realistically that's going to impact you guys all that much. Moving on to the sprint, how much does it cost? Absolutely nothing, it's your signature ability. How fast do you run technically when you're sprinting? As far as I could tell, you move 33% faster than normal running, and also when you're going backwards, you move 33% faster than normal running. How about if you're strafing, you actually move at the same speed as you would normally. So strafing, sprinting doesn't really work that well. How fast does the gauge run out when you're sprinting? It goes from 100 to 0 in about 15 seconds, using 6 to 7 units of gauge per second. How fast does the gauge replenish? Well, it takes a full minute to go from 0 units to 100, so you get about 2 units of gauge per second when it's not in use. Can I get the sprint back any faster? Yes, if you get a kill, you instantly replenish 25 units of the gauge for your sprint. So if you kill 2 people in a short succession, you get 50 and you can use that instantly. Can I do anything else while sprinting? For example, can I shoot or use abilities? You cannot shoot. If you try and shoot, it will interrupt the sprint, or you cannot do anything with a weapon. You can, however, use all of your abilities whilst in mid-sprint. Does Neon stopping and not moving use less of the gauge? No, if you don't move around either by shift walking or standing still, the resource will still run out when you have this ability activated, regardless of whether you're technically using it or not. Does me automatically being still cancel the sprint? No, so you got to be careful with that. You have to deactivate the ability. Next question obviously is, how do I do that? You can either do it by left clicking to bring your weapon out, by changing your weapon via your keybinds or the scroll wheel, or just re-clicking the E button again to stop the sprint. Or by sliding, but we'll get onto that shortly. What is the equip time after a sprint? About half a second with a rifle, so it's actually a little bit quicker than normal, but still obviously a little bit dangerous because you're making a lot of noise. Is shift walking while sprinting faster than normal shift walking? The answer is no. You would move at the same speed as you would normally. So again, be careful with using that ability in that time because it's doing nothing for you. Are you louder when it comes to sprinting? Yes, but actually no. To be clear, the radius of footsteps whilst you're sprinting is still the same. You cannot be heard from further away outside of that radius while sprinting in comparison to normal running. However, if there's an enemy in that radius, they will hear you a lot louder. They will also hear some more pronounced noises with the static sounds, which clearly let them know that it's you, the Neon, that's sprinting. So again, to reiterate, the sound radius is exactly the same, but within that radius, a Neon is more pronounced and a little bit louder than normal people when she's sprinting. I hope that makes sense. Are there any other giveaways that Neon is sprinting? Yeah, she actually leaves these little electric footsteps behind. Not too useful, but a good indicator in some scenarios if you hear a Neon nearby and you want to double check that it's her. Does sprinting allow for an extended jump? Yes, it does. I'm not sure by how much, but you can sort of see from the gameplay that you can get across bigger gaps. So I'm curious to see what pros do there, what areas that they can get to on a map because of this. And also you can sprint bunny hop, which is a very useful trick to learn I can't quite get down. Does being tagged by bullets interrupt the sprint? I don't have any gameplay of this, but no, if you get tagged, it doesn't interrupt the sprint ability, but it does slow you down in a similar fashion to being tagged normally whilst you're running. Does being stunned by an ability interrupt the sprint? Being stunned doesn't interrupt the sprint at all. No ability technically interrupts you using the ability and stops it outright, other than suppression. Does a stunned Neon still move faster sprinting than a normal stunned target? The answer is yes. Whilst you're sprinting, you still move a little bit faster than a normal person when they're stunned. And it's the same for when you're slowed by either a chamber or a sage slow up like you're seeing. Does sprinting into somebody do any damage? No, it doesn't. It also stops you in your tracks completely, but there is an interaction I want to highlight in a second with the slide. Does sprinting break a tripwire if you run through it? The answer is no. And can you realistically just sprint through an alarm bot to avoid it going off? The answer is almost. If you just try and fully send it through an alarm bot, you will always get caught before you can get through it, but obviously if you go through some of the sides, you might be able to sneak by and have better results. If I die as Neon and I get rezzed, will I have a full sprint gauge? Will it replenish normally? The answer is it will replenish normally. Whilst you're dead, your sprint gauge is going to be going up as it usually would do. So if you die with 0 charge and you get rezzed 1 second later, you're not going to have any extra charge really. But if you're rezzed 30 seconds after you die, you'll have 50 charge in your gauge ready to use. If it's more than a minute, you'll have all 100 gauge ready to go for your sprint. So as a TLDR, whilst I'm dead, my gauge is technically recharging as normal. The answer is yes, not any faster or slower. Does being suppressed by KO or a lockdown cancel the sprint? Yes, it does, and it stops the ability being used, so it doesn't drain any more gauge whilst you're suppressed. Moving on to the slide, this is technically the signature ability too, and yeah, this is the actual physical signature ability that you can activate. How often can I use it? Once per round, and it doesn't cost any credits. Once you use the slide with your sprint, you can't use it again until the next round, or other than a couple of interactions that I'll highlight. For example, can you get it back? Yeah, much like the other duelists, if you use the slide and then get 2 kills, it resets the ability charge for it. Kind of like Jet's dash or Raze's paint shell. If you use the slide, you get 2 kills, you can use the slide again. It's the same thing. How far does the slide travel? I think it's about 5 meters total, but I could be wrong. A good amount of distance. Can I reduce or increase how far I travel depending on how fast I'm running? No, it'll always go the same distance unless you're doing some of the super slide stuff that Average Jonas was doing, for example. Can I slide sideways or backwards? The answer is no, you can only slide forward, unlike something like a jet dash. Can you still slide whilst you're using the ability and being still? No, you have to be moving forward to use it. Basically, if you have those lines on your screen to show that you're going fast, you can then slide. If you're stood still, nothing will actually happen. Does Neon have to be full sprinting to use the ability? Kinda, yeah. Even just moving a little bit or shift walking won't allow you to use the slide ability. How long does the slide last duration wise? Well, from using the ability to being stood up again, it lasts about 1 second, but you can use your gun a little bit earlier. It starts to come back up again after 0.2 seconds from using the ability. How fast can I pull out a gun after sliding? From what the devs said, it varies from gun to gun. For a rifle like a Phantom or a Vandal, it takes about 0.6 seconds from starting the slide to that first bullet being fired. However, some guns with faster pull-ups like the Stinger, you're able to get it actually after 0.4 seconds. Is there an additional inaccuracy for these guns that have a faster pull-out time to compensate for that? The devs said yes, but I didn't see a clear example of that in game, so I'm not really that sure. But we've seen a lot of sliding, sprinting, dashing judge play, so maybe we're going to see a lot more of that too. Is your hitbox different when sliding in comparison to a normal crouched person? No, you are just a very fast crouched person that can still be headshot. Does sliding into an enemy do any damage? No, but there is a cool interaction to highlight. What is the cool interaction? If you slide into an enemy, you basically bounce off of them, which could be really handy if you're in a situation where you find yourself suddenly in a fight. You could just run and dash at them, you're going to bounce off of them. No doubt they're going to panic, and it might be useful in the future, who knows. Just to check, the slide doesn't break any tripwires or anything like that. The answer is no, it doesn't do anything. Does the slide make an audio noise? Yes, and this is what it sounds like. When it comes to audio rules, it's the same as everything else when it comes to the radius. What if you slide into the step radius for an enemy? This was a really interesting thing to test out, because if you slide right as you hit a person's audio radius, you don't actually hear the dash at all, you just hear the step afterwards. I don't know how realistically impactful this is going to be going forward, but I thought it was interesting to highlight. Does being rezzed replenish the slide? No, but something else does, that being the ultimate. Moving on to that, how many ult obs does it cost? It costs 7. What is the duration of the ultimate? It's 20 seconds from having the full 100 gauge to 0. Does that mean that when you use the ult, does the gauge deplete any faster or slower than normal sprinting? It depletes a little bit slower. For the normal sprint from 100 to 0, it's 15 seconds as a reminder, so for the ult it's 20. It means that you have a bit more time to use with the ultimate and also to sprint. Can I extend that duration somehow? Same as the sprint, if you kill an enemy, you get 25 extra charge per kill. But what if I'm playing in the round, I use all of my sprint and I don't have any left? If you're at 0 sprint and you use the ultimate, it automatically replenishes back to 100, and then it will start depleting as the ultimate's used. If I activate the ultimate, can I just pause it to stop using the gauge? The answer is no. If you activate the ultimate, it will use up that gauge whether you're stood still, whether you actually put the lasers away. It's basically a Reina Empress in that regard. You can't put it away like a Jet Blade Storm. Can I use my abilities whilst ulting? The answer is yes, the same as sprinting. Are there any other important things to note about the abilities? There is one thing in particular. If you've already used the slide in a round and then you ult, you will automatically get another charge of the slide ready to use. Can I bring out another gun whilst I'm ulting? Yeah, you can just bring out your Vandal, whatever gun you're running with, if you want to use that instead. Does me putting away the zappy fingers or being still slow down the ultimate in any way? No, again, much like the sprint, whilst it's activated, it'll run out at the same speed, regardless of what you're doing with it. Does running whilst you're using your ultimate have a different speed to whilst you're sprinting as Neon? And ult running and sprinting are the same speed. Does running with your ultimate sound any different to normal sprinting for Neon? And the answer is I'm pretty sure it doesn't. They both sound the same. What about if you're comparing shift walking between a normal player, a sprint in Neon, and an ult in Neon? Are they different in any way? The answer is no. Everybody moves at the same speed, regardless of whether you're using your ult, you're sprinting, or just a breach player. You'll all move the same speed when you're shift walking with your knife out. So the ult movement overall interacts the same way as the sprint, and the answer is yeah, basically. Moving on to the damage part of it from the Zappy Zap, how much damage does it do? Because it's a tracking ability, it does ticking damage. At the closest range, it does about 22 damage per tick, but it does have a drop-off range. The better question is, how much DPS does this ability do? Well, a zap ticks 20 times per second, so 20 times 22. It means that at a close range, you can do 440 damage to a target in 1 second, so long as you're in that closest drop-off range, and also pretty accurate. We'll highlight how hard this can actually be in just a second. The next question is, what are the drop-off ranges? If you're from 0 to 15 meters away, you'll do 22 damage per tick. From 15 to 20 meters, you'll do 21, and then it starts to dip. At 20 meters, you'll do 20 damage. 30 meters, you'll do 16. And then from 50 meters to infinite, you'll do 10 damage per tick. The next question, of course, is, wait, does this ability have an infinite range? And the answer is yes. Look how far away I can actually get while still hitting this target. But that's easier said than done in a real game, and 10 damage per tick isn't really that much. Also, the zap does have its own ammo, so how does that work? Each tick from the weapon is an ammo count. So firing the zap will use 20 ammo per second, so you go from having 40 ammo to 0 in 2 seconds of straight firing. How quickly does the ammo replenish from empty to full? It takes about 2.5 seconds. It takes half a second from the charge starting again from 0, and then it'll charge 20 units per second. What is the duration of time between it being empty and me being able to fire the ability again? The answer to that is 1 second, but you'll only have 10 ammo. So you're waiting 1 second to fire for half a second, if that makes sense. Is the ability fully accurate when running? The answer is yes. Is the ability fully accurate when sliding? Yeah, and also you can fire throughout the slide. You don't have a weapon pull-out time where you can't use this laser. Is there a time where the Zappy Zap isn't fully accurate? And there's two. When you're jumping and whilst you're in the air, but also whilst you're on zip lines, both vertical and horizontal, and regardless of whether you're moving or not, you will be inaccurate with this ability. Can you headshot with the ultimate? No, you can't. You don't do any headshot multiplying damage. Can the laser do collateral damage? Yes, so it's actually really good at mowing people down in herds, as you're seeing on screen. How accurate do you realistically need to do considerable damage with this ability? And the answer is pretty accurate, as you're seeing on screen. If you're just flailing around, you can see just how little or as many ticks I'm actually hit with. So it's better to get practice in your tracking with stuff like AimLab and Kovacs whenever you get a second. Does the lightning ability break all objects, or is it weird like the fast lane ability that we highlighted? No, it breaks everything just fine. Everything that should be breakable, you can do with your ultimate. Does being stunned have any impact on the fire rate of the ultimate? And the answer is, I don't think so. You can take your look yourself. It's more just the inaccuracy as you're initially hit that you start to see a bit of a dip, but as you're stunned, it's firing just as normal. What's the equip time between the ultimate to your gun? So if you go from using your zap to your gun, it's a normal equip time. So if you're using a big rifle, it takes 1 second from switching to firing. If it's vice versa, if you go from your gun to your ultimate, it's actually very fast. 1/3 of a second between switching your gun to firing your laser. Is the equip time for the ultimate faster after using abilities? For the fast lane ability, no, it's the same as the gun. But for the relay bolt, you actually bring this out a lot faster. You can use the ability and then fire again in 1/4 of a second. So there's a lot of fast combination potential there between that ability and your ultimate. Does being suppressed by KO cancel the ultimate? It doesn't cancel the ult completely, but you put away your laser, you can't sprint, and all the while your gauge will be getting used up at the normal rate. The question then is, if I'm ulting as Neon and there's a KO and he uses his null command ultimate, can he just do that and blue ball me from my ultimate completely? And the answer is yes, unfortunately. But what about if you have a Neon that ults, she gets suppressed and gets a kill, does the bar still replenish? And the answer is yes. Even if you're suppressed, you will still get that 25 gauge back after killing an enemy. I don't know if this necessarily works for killing an ulting KO or an ulting Phoenix, but I would assume that you would get that charge based on the fact that that's what happens with Reyna and the obs that she can use. And the final question, if I'm a Neon and I use my ultimate but then get killed and then get rezzed by a Sage, do I get to keep the ultimate at all? And the answer is no, it gets used up, unfortunately, but you'll still have the gauge for sprinting, as I mentioned beforehand. And yeah, that's a lot of questions that we've had to go through. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'm very much appreciative of the fact that you watched it to the end. If you have any more questions,